Good Monday morning. I love cooking and I love programming, and I often feel like cooking teaches me how to be a better programmer. That is what we're going to explore today. I am MPJ and you are watching Fun Function. So here I am in our new apartment, unpacking a lot of boxes. Still everything is in chaos. I believe that the sound will be a lot of echo, because none of this soundproofing stuff is up on the walls yet. As one is unpacking a lot of stuff, you start thinking about what stuff you have around. And I own a chef's knife, and I also own this. It's an onion chopper. You put onions inside here, you close it, and then you just go. The onion chopper can do, well, that. It can chop onions and only that. I bought this before I bought my nice chef's knife. And I bought it, I guess, because, well, I chop a lot of onions and I wanted to be better and more efficient at cooking, I guess. But a few months after I bought it, I bought this chef's knife. And I bought it on Kickstarter. And like Kickstarter things are, it was delayed, and they during the delay they posted these links to resources where you could learn how to actually use a chef's knife properly. To be honest, I had not learned that. I had not learned how to properly grip them, and I had not really practiced using it, and I also didn't know how to sharpen them, so I constantly had dull knives, and that led to me not valuing having a sharp knife because, you know, dull knives was all I knew. So as I waited for this knife to arrive, I learned how to hold it properly, and I practiced cutting onions and cutting meat and cutting. And I learned how to keep knife sharp. And after a while, I found myself using my onion cutter less and less, because even using my old cheap knives, I ended up being pretty good at cutting onions without this thing. When the knife arrived, I did improve some. It's a nice knife, but the big improvement in total came from me. That I had actually spent some time learning how to use the most basic and versatile tool that a chef has, the chef's knife. A couple of weeks back I did a video on dependency injection. If you don't know what dependency injection is, it doesn't matter for this video. What's important is that it is something that you can do manually, but there are also tools available that does it for you. Last week I did another video where I intentionally made the most convoluted Hello World example possible. Basically it was a satire on how to make things needlessly complicated. I have linked those two videos in the episode description, by the way. And one of the things I did in that video was to pull in a dependency injection framework, because in my mind that is the onion chopper of programming. Because you can do dependency injection just fine with the programming language that you are using without resorting to a specialized tool. Now, in the kitchen you have limited space. The more gadgets and trinkets you drag into it, the more crowded things will become, and the harder it will be to find things and work in the kitchen. In a kitchen, you will run out of space eventually, and you will be naturally forced to do the prioritization that, okay, this thing, it just has a too narrow of a use case, so I should get rid of it. However, in software development, you don't have that natural safeguard that the limited space in the kitchen gives you. No, in software, when you run out of your proverbial cupboards, you can just spawn more cupboards. You can simply spawn infinite amounts of cupboards until you are stuck in a maze of cupboards with different versions of onion cutters in them. Another thing that specialized tools in the kitchen shares with programming is that it makes it harder to approach the kitchen, so to speak. Let's say I have a friend over for dinner and they help out with the cooking, and I ask them to chop the onions and I hand them an onion cutter. Then they will have to learn how to use this thing. They have to spend a little time getting up to speed with it. On the other hand, if I hand them a chef's knife, they will know how to use that immediately. So what am I saying here? Should you never use an onion cutter? Should you never have one? Is this a useless product? Should you never use libraries? Should you never pull in any dependencies? Shall we code every single thing ourselves? Well, some teams actually do take that approach. The Excel team at Microsoft actually had this approach. They were notorious for being extremely skeptical about dependencies. I think they even had their own compiler. I've linked an article about that in the episode description. But I think that is not generally applicable advice for most projects. That would be just crazy. And that is absolutely not what I want to say with this video. But I think that there is something to be said for being skeptical about adding dependencies. I think more what I'm saying is that whenever you find yourself in a situation where you have a problem that you can solve by pulling in a dependency, ask yourself, would I pay $1,000 for this dependency? I don't know, $1,000, like just some figure. Like, imagine that the dependency has a big cost, because it does. It's so easy to just install a library and bam, your problem is solved, and it feels like zero cost. However, you now have a dependency that you need to keep updated. Other developers will have to spend time to learn, and if, or rather when, really, it gets abandoned, you will have to replace it. And there's probably more than those 3 costs. I can't think of any right now. Can you comment? But the point is that dependencies have a cost, and we need to remember that. In some cases, it's obvious that it's worth it. I mean, let's say a database. I would gladly pay $1,000 not to have to implement a database. That would, in almost all cases, be incredibly dumb to write yourself. jQuery back in the days before we had like good standardized DOM manipulation, then jQuery was really valuable and easily worth $1,000, and it was, yes, just pull that in. That was amazing. If we're thinking about dependencies that I think are more gray area, I think that React is a good example of that. For some projects, the virtual DOM diffing and the component structure, it's really, really valuable, and I would really miss it, and that's easily $1,000. But in other projects that are smaller and doesn't really make use of the virtual DOM diffing or the components, then pulling in React is really just kind of dead weight. In those cases, it's just a lot more simple to just do the rendering straight up with just JavaScript. And if we're talking tools that I think are really out on thin ice on this, then dependency injection frameworks are what I definitely think is an analog to my onion cutter, in the sense that almost every case I see them used, it is so much added weight for something that could have been solved very easily and also more understandably with just plain programming, like the vanilla programming language. If you can do something with just a few lines of code, do not pull in a library just to save those lines of code, because the trade-off is just not worth it. Yes, you're saving yourself those lines of code, but you're also adding in all of the hidden costs with a dependency, and you end up with a net negative. And that's all I had to say today. Spend some time becoming good with your basic tool, your programming language, your chef's knife, and imagine that every sophisticated external tool that you pull in has a high cost. Because it does. You have just watched an episode of Fun Function. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. But you will be distracted by some hacker news shit on Monday and miss it. So you can turn on notifications by clicking the little bell next to the subscribe button in the YouTube app. If you don't want to wait that long, you can watch this video that Google has selected for you using machine learning and years of spying on your personal habits. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.